So, question number 2 of micro quiz number 8. What are the 4 tissue types? I'll give you a little hint here. The bones and blood, those are not one of the 4 main tissue types. Those are both examples of one of those main types of tissue. Yeah, a little hint there. So, moving on. Let's talk about these different types of blood vessels that we have within our circulatory system. So we have these things called arteries here. These arteries are going to carry blood away from the heart. So if the blood is being carried away from the heart, would that be oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood? It would be oxygenated because it's coming from the heart. That means that it is before it went to the heart, it came from the lungs. So that is this oxygenated, this blood that's full of oxygen, full of nutrients as well for those cells. So arteries carry blood that is full of oxygen and nutrients. Veins are going to carry blood to the heart. So they're going to carry blood to the heart from our other cells that have already used up that oxygen, have already used up those nutrients. So what is in the blood within the veins? They are going to include waste products as well as carbon dioxide. Both arteries and veins have smaller components. So arteries and veins, those are those really large blood vessels. A smaller version of an artery is called an arteriole. These arterioles, these are going to act very similar to arteries, but they're going to be much smaller, and they're going to have some different structures in their muscles, which you'll learn more about if you take an anatomy class, within the muscle that encompasses those, blood vessels. Veins, they have a smaller version of veins as well, and those are called venules. Venules are going to be very similar to veins, but they're going to be significantly smaller. So the third type of blood vessel that exists within our body, within our system, is going to be these capillaries. Capillaries are going to join arterioles and venules. So remember, the arterioles and the venules, those are going to be those smaller versions of the veins and arteries. And so these smaller versions are going to be joined in this region that is like purple right here. So and then in these capillaries, that is going to be where the oxygen exchange, where the nutrient exchange, where that waste exchange, all of that happens within the capillaries. It does not happen within veins. It does not happen within the arteries, arterioles, or venules. None of that can take place, only the capillaries. So let's pretend the heart is right here. So here's the heart. That heart is that really strong muscle that's going to pump the blood through to these arteries. So it's going to travel down the arteries, and then it's going to reach some blood vessels, or some cells rather, some cells that need that oxygen and those nutrients. So through the arteries into these arterioles, and then these arterioles are going to give way to the capillaries right here. Capillaries is going to be where that exchange takes place. Those cells are going to receive that much needed oxygen. They're going to get rid of their carbon dioxide that they do not need. That's that waste product. And then that blood is going to travel out through these venules and then out through the veins and then back to the heart. When it gets to the heart, then it's going to be pumped to the lungs. The lungs are going to get rid of that carbon dioxide, and it's going to take in that oxygen, and then it's going to travel back to the heart, and then it's going to travel out of the heart through to the rest of the body. And the circle continues. So question number 3, in your own words, what is homeostasis? What does that word mean? If you copy and paste the definition from the book, I will not give you credit, or from the lecture rather, I will not give you credit. This has to be in your own words. And I'd like for you to use the prefix and the suffix homeo and stasis within your definition. Okay, so moving on. The human cardiovascular system is really organized into these two units. And it just depends where the blood is going from. So we have the pulmonary circuit. Pulmonary. Now, what does that word pulmonary mean? Maybe you've heard of a pulmonologist. That's going to be a lung doctor. So pulmonary refers to the lungs. So this pulmonary circuit is going to travel from the heart to the lungs. So this is going to be unoxygenated blood. This blood comes from the body, and it comes from the body to the heart, and then the heart is going to pump it to the lungs so that the lungs can get rid of that carbon dioxide and then instead fill that blood with oxygen. So this is going to take place in half the heart. Half the heart is going to be part of the pulmonary circuit. The other half is going to be part of the systemic circuit. So systemic, that word means your system. So that really refers to the rest of your body, basically. And this is going to be the part of your heart that is going to, the other half of your heart, that's going to really pump that blood that is going to travel to the rest of the body. So the blood that it pumps is going to be oxygenated. It's going to have lots and lots of oxygen that is going to go to the rest of the body there. So the heart, the blood that leaves the heart in the pulmonary circuit, this here is the pulmonary circuit, this here is the systemic circuit. So in the pulmonary circuit, this blood that leaves the heart, this is going to be blood that is not oxygenated. It is going to be full of carbon dioxide instead. And so that's what this blue means. So full of blood, full of carbon dioxide, it goes to the lungs, gets oxygenated, then it becomes red and it travels back to the heart. Eventually then that blood is going to travel through this side of the heart and then out through to the rest of the body right here. And then travels back through this side of the heart. So we have quite a few issues that can happen with our cardiovascular system. We have hypertension. Hypertension is a very, very common disease that happens in a large percentage of Americans, especially older individuals or individuals that have too much salt in their diet. Hypertension is often caused, especially in Americans, by too much salt. Not always, but a lot of the time. So hypertension, what that means is it means that there is a lot, that's what hyper means, a lot of pressure. That's what tension really means, it's pressure. So too much pressure, this refers to blood pressure. So high blood pressure is going to increase all risks of cardiovascular issues. So it's going to increase the risk of a heart attack, heart disease, as well as stroke. And this is actually going to, these issues, heart attack, heart disease, and stroke are going to be the most common disease, the most common thing that kills Americans. Heart disease is another issue that can go wrong with this cardiovascular system. Heart disease is a generic term that is going to refer to some sort of blocking of the arteries. It can be caused by hypertension. It can be caused by many other issues as well, such as a genetic component or these fatty deposits. So it's often going to result from these fatty deposits, and these fatty deposits are going to block those arteries. And if those arteries get blocked, then the heart is not going to be able to work the way that it should. And this is, again, the most common cause of death among Americans. Anemia is also very common. Anemia is a very common issue with the cardiovascular system, and this actually occurs most often in individuals that are malnourished, individuals that do not get enough iron in their system. If people aren't eating enough fruits and vegetables, if they aren't eating enough meat, or if they're eating too much dairy, that can all cause anemia. Too much calcium, and calcium is very common in dairy. So anemia is going to be a lack of iron. That's really what anemia means. And that occurs when the carry enough oxygen. So if there isn't enough iron in the person's body, then that blood isn't going to be able to work the way that it should, and there isn't going to be enough oxygen there. Some symptoms of anemia are going to include a lack of energy. That's going to be the main source of anemia, or the main symptom of anemia. And this can be very serious, and this is much more common in women than it is in men. So let's talk a little bit about different blood that exists within our body. So what do you guys think? What does the oxygen content, whether high or low, for the blood that's flowing from your heart to your toes in your artery? So is there more oxygen that is flowing from the blood that's right next to your heart versus the blood that's in your toes, that's going to your toes? And this can be compared to, what about the oxygen content from blood that's flowing from your brain to your heart in a vein? From your brain to your heart in a vein. So what happens is that your oxygen content is going to stay about the same when it leaves your heart and as it gets to your toes. But once it gets to your toes and it goes through those capillaries, that is when that oxygen is going to start to go down. And once it gets through those capillaries are the only place in our blood vessels that oxygen can be removed, can be used up. And so there is going to be the same amount that goes as soon as it leaves your heart as in your toes. Now let's talk about comparing arteries versus veins. So this is going to be blood that's flowing from your brain back to your heart. So it's leaving your brain. It's already been through those capillaries, and it's going back to your heart via a vein. So there's going to be a lot more oxygen in this artery than there is in a vein, because when it's already left your brain, it's going to have already used up that oxygen. It's already been through those capillaries. So question number 4 of microquiz number 8. What is an example of an accessory digestive organ? An accessory organ. Let's multiple examples if you want. But the first example must be the most accurate. The first example isn't an example of an accessory organ, then it's going to have to be marked wrong. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the heart. So the heart is going to be made up of these 4 different chambers, is what they're called. We have the right atrium, the right ventricle, left atrium, and the left ventricle. So if you've ever heard of the word atrium, maybe a part of a really big house or of a convention center, they might say, let's meet in the atrium. Atria is plural for atrium, right? What they mean by that is they mean the entryway. That's really what an atrium is, and that's what people use it for in their houses or in like a big conference center, some big type of building. And so the atrium is the entryway. And so the blood comes into the heart. So this is the pulmonary circuit. The blood comes from the lungs into the heart, or sorry, this comes from the body right here. Comes from the body into the right atrium, and then that blood moves from the right atrium into the right ventricle. The blood then moves from the right ventricle out through, these are called the pulmonary veins. Sorry, these are the pulmonary arteries. And these arteries are going to then move the blood through to the lungs. The lungs are then going to move that blood back through to the heart through these pulmonary veins, and then they are going to then receive the blood, the heart is going to receive that blood from the lungs. Remember, now it's going to be really oxygenated blood into this left atrium. The left atrium means area where entryway, basically. So here's the entryway into the heart, and then it leaves the heart by going into this ventricle, and then that is where it's going to be pumped out of the aorta. The aorta is your main artery, a really, really big artery that's going to pump to the rest of your body. Again, the atria are going to be those entryways. Those are going to be those chambers where it is going to receive the blood, either from the lungs or from the body system. And then the ventricles are going to be the main muscle, really. So there is going to be, the ventricles are going to be the big oomph that's going to actually cause the blood to move out of the heart through either to the lungs or to the rest of the body. So your cardiac cycle is going to be this constant rhythm of contraction and then relaxation. Contraction, relaxation. And that's what you hear when you hear that pump, that heart pumping. If you can feel your pulse, you're going to feel every contraction. But in order for that contraction to be able to take place, in order for it to be able to actually pump blood, we need to have that relaxation as well. And that's actually going to be the most common issue that occurs when an individual gets old and they start having more heart issues, is that relaxation isn't able to work as well as it should. And that has to do with losing flexibility within, or elasticity within, that heart. So those two different systems, those that contraction or relaxation, that's called diastole, and systole. So diastole is going to be the heart relaxing, and systole is going to be that heart contracting. So when the heart is in diastole, so that is that relaxation mode. So when it is in that relaxation mode, that is when the blood vessels that are surrounding that heart are going to force that blood to enter the heart. So once that heart is nice and full of blood, the way that it should be, then it's going to start to contract. And as it contracts, then it's going to be able to push that blood out. So again, if it's not able to relax as well as it should, if it's not going to be elastic and it's not going to be able to really stretch out to allow that blood to enter, then it's not going to be, then no matter how hard you contract, you're not going to be able to push very much blood out. So systole, this contraction that is systole, this is going to be caused by, or we have two different types of this systole. We have a ventricular systole. The ventricular systole is going to be the contraction of those main muscles of the ventricles right here. So those bottom, those superior, lower muscles, inferior. So those lower heart muscles contracting, that is the ventricular systole, and that's what's going to cause the blood to leave the heart. Whether that blood is leaving the heart to go to your systems or the blood is leaving the heart to go to the lungs, that depends on which ventricle we're talking about. And then we also have atrial systole. So the atria, here is the atria right here and over here. Those atria, when they contract, that's going to cause the blood to move from the atria to the ventricles. Question number 5 of micro quiz number 8, where does the absorption of nutrients take place? So question number 5, where does the absorption of nutrients take place? The timing of your heartbeat, how fast or how slow it's going to pump, that all is determined by this thing that we call our pacemaker. The pacemaker is actually called the SA node, the sinoatrial node. And this is what gives us that sinus rhythm, if you've ever heard of that. The SA node is made up of nervous tissue. It makes sense that it's a nervous tissue because that is what controls the heartbeat. the heart is going to beat based on a message of electrical message, or based on these electrical messages. The SA node is going to cause the atria to contract. Remember, the atria are going to be these top chambers, those superior chambers. And then it's going to send that message to the atrioventricular node, the AV node. The AV node is down here. And when the AV node gets that message from the SA node, then it is going to cause the ventricles to contract. And that is how we have a heartbeat. If your coronary arteries become blocked, those heart muscles can really quickly die. And the blockage of these coronary arteries are called a myocardial infarction. That's an MI, or it's also called a heart attack. This is often going to be the result of a buildup of fatty deposits. That's called plaque. This plaque can be caused by diet, it can be caused by lack of exercise, it can also just be caused by genetics. Genetics plays a huge factor in these, in the possibility of having a myocardial infarction. And the buildup of this plaque is the result of this gradual process. It's called atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is going to be basically the hardening of those arteries. So question number 6 for micro quiz number 8. This is that extra credit question. Which part of the body is responsible for mechanical digestion? Mechanical digestion. And explain why it is responsible for mechanical digestion. So explain the mechanics behind it, if you will. All right, that's it for today. And tomorrow we will pick up with more about blood vessels. And by tomorrow, I mean Wednesday.